The coronavirus pandemic is casting shadows over Japan's economy. A lockdown imposed in April to stem the spread of the disease was lifted in mid-May, but many businesses are still struggling to attract buyers.
I can see there's something wrong with the economy because some of the shops I used to go to have gone out of business.
Consumer spending, which makes up more than a third of GDP, fell by 8.2% in the second quarter. A drop in global demand for cars, electronics and other products also trimmed exports by 3%. And businesses seem unsure about a quick revival in sales. They've scaled down investments by 1.5%. The government announced a massive $1.1 trillion stimulus package in May, and the economy minister says the worst is over.
We artificially stopped economic activities, so this tough result comes from that impact. We will continue to make the utmost effort to put the economy on a growth path.
But analysts say a resurgence of COVID-19 cases and rising tensions over international trade will lead to more job losses and business closures.
The Japanese consumption behavior is actually very conservative. In other words, Japanese people have the highest level of risk avoidance. And when you look at the employment figures, things are getting really bad very quickly. And there will be, I can see, a profound effect that will take place in about 6 months to 9 months to maybe a year from now, where you will see the laggard effect of the bad employment figures that would impose a very bad negative effect to private consumption. The geopolitical tension that is caused by China in this area is also casting a very dark shadow.
The government and many businesses are hoping that tourists arriving for the Olympic Games next year will help turn around the economy. So far, Japan has invested about $15 billion in hosting the event. But scientists say the tournament may have to be delayed until a vaccine for COVID-19 is available. That would create even more hardships for many Japanese who are already struggling through the country's worst economic crisis. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Well, for more on this, Bill Emmott joins us now from Dublin. He's chairman of the Japan Society of the UK and former editor-in-chief of The Economist magazine. Welcome back to the program, Bill. Now, grim GDP figures out of Japan, but not as bad as some Western countries that had stricter lockdown measures. Is this a vindication of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's delayed and less restrictive response to the pandemic?
Well, I think it's a vindication of Japan's geographical position, namely close to China, within Asia, which has limited the slump in exports. I don't think that Prime Minister Abe's policies are particularly responsible here. It's true we shouldn't get too excited about this fall in GDP. It's, as you said, less than the US, it's less than the UK, it's better than Malaysia, which came out today, better than Thailand, which came out today, but it's worse than Korea, Taiwan, and of course China. So I think Japan is in the middle ranking by international standards. It is, though, on a full year basis, going to take a hit from the postponement of the Olympics, which will reduce tourist numbers the whole year, and particularly tourist numbers were expected to rise for the whole year to around 40 million people, maybe even more. That basically is stopped. That influx of income has stopped. And the big question for Japan is when can that really start again? And at the moment, essentially, very few people are allowed to travel to Japan, so there's no prospect of it starting soon.
And we know the Japanese government has unleashed more than $1 trillion worth of stimulus measures to mitigate the economic impact of the pandemic. We heard the economy minister there say that the worst is over for Japan's economy. Do you believe that to be the case?
Well, of course, it's his job to say that, and it's possible that he's right. I think that if there's no big resurgence of infections, and if some international travel opens up, and if the East Asian economies, particularly China, Korea, and Taiwan, continue to recover, and China has been seeing growth in GDP in the second quarter, of course, then I think he could be right. But of course, there are a lot of ifs in what I've just said, because this is an uncertain, unknown scenario. We really don't know what's going to happen with the pandemic, when a vaccine is going to come. I'm an optimist. I think there'll be a vaccine will emerge in the autumn to late this year, become widely available after that. So probably his optimism might be proven true, but that all depends.
Now, can I ask you quickly about an economy further south? India has just registered more than 50,000 deaths. We know that the country had one of the world's strictest coronavirus lockdown measures in the world, but right now we're seeing a surge in cases across the country. How is that likely to impact an economy that really was seen as a bright spot among the emerging economies of the world?
Well, it's clearly negative for the Indian economy. India is a relatively small trader compared with other Asian countries, so that it has been less affected by the slowdown in global trade than other countries. And frankly, it's more accustomed to natural disasters and to disease, and so things will carry on a bit of their own accord. And within a very large economy, you can have real crises in one part of the country where the other part operates reasonably normally. So all that's to say that I think India is resilient, but clearly it's now in a very, very severe phase of the infections. I think it's going to be the pressure on public health and on all sorts of public spending is going to be high, and there will be new local lockdowns are going to be necessary. So it's negative, but I think probably not disastrous for the Indian economy, because it's relatively resilient and, unfortunately, relatively underdeveloped in terms of international trade and particularly international travel as well.
Okay, Bill Emmott from the Japan Society of the UK, thank you again for joining us on the program.